Yeah, basically capitalism without capital in the era of 21st century. I think this topic or this must be known to everybody who are living in this era because the capitalism is everywhere. Whatever we buy, whatever we do, we exchange money so that it is everywhere within our society. Before I could go into the topic, I will give you some brief history of capitalism and some types of political and economic systems which are currently prevailing in the world. At first, some types of economic and political systems are capitalism, socialism, and communism. If you see capitalism, in capitalism, the free citizens are free to go into business for themselves and produce whatever they want and distribute whatever they like. In this effort, they get rewarded by the capitalist who owns a huge fortune so that these private citizens who produce goods will make themselves some money. And this type of capitalist system is currently prevailing in USA. And next, we are going to see about socialism. In socialism, the government controls use of country's factors of production. That means the government controls the whole country, and each and everything which is done by a fellow citizen would be owned by the whole country. And this type of system was practiced in Soviet Union, and which is now currently the present Russia. And communism, in communism, almost in all nations, the factors of productions are owned by the government, same as socialism, but the factors which is produced are equally shared among the people. And this type of system, this type is now currently practiced in China and Cuba. In this, we can see a pictorial representation of capitalism. In the first, in capitalism, we can see for the work some worker does, he is being rewarded by some rich capitalist. But in the same case, in National Socialism, everyone does the same job. Everyone does the same job, and everything is owned by the national, state, or country. And in the communism, if somebody is doing some work and the products of work are equally shared among the citizens. Next, we'll see somewhat about a capital. Before I can go into a capital, let's imagine I would give a carpenter a log of wood. With that log of wood, the carpenter would use his labor, time, and skills. With his labor, time, and skills, he produces a brand new, beautiful furniture. With this furniture as a capital for the carpenter, he now exchanges his capital with a farmer. A farmer who uses his time, skill, and labor and produces some amount of food or wheat with his labor, time, and skills. And with this capital, with the farmer and carpenter, both exchange each other. The carpenter gives farmer his beautiful furniture, and the farmer exchanges with it for some wheat so that he could make his living. This is what the idea of capital or wealth. As the time goes by, capital or wealth was known as money. Money has been a store value of labor, time, and skills, which has been accepted throughout the society, which does not lose its value over the time due to inflation or deflation. Over the period, the time became one of the main instruments of power. So, whichever country which owns the capital or wealth was able to control the world. And with this ideology, soon slavery began developing. Soon the wealthy nations began to control the colonies with their military power and raise wealth. And slavery became one of the capital instruments to raise wealth. And slavery began to rise as workforce ideology of wealth was spread among the nation. As this, slavery and colonies were rising throughout the country to make fortune for only capitalist or wealthy countries for themselves. With this view in the capitalism, an English economist, Adam Smith, stated that this slavery was very inefficient process. Why he stated a slavery was an inefficient process is because the cost of slavery, when I buy a slave, I need to spend huge money on a slave, and I need to spend huge money in his day-to-day activities such as food, rent, and etc. So he stated that the cost of slavery is far exceeds the cost of his wages which you pay your worker. So he explained that if one slave could make 20 pence a day, the same 20 workers who are highly skilled in that process, and when they are organized in a particular fashion, they can make about 48,000 pence, which is a far more when compared to 20 pence, which is made by one worker. And this ideology, which gave rise to modern slavery. As you can see in this picture, the slaves, which were 200 or 2 centuries ago, and now the slaves are the workforce who makes capital for the rich by working day and night so that they can make the fortune for themselves, but they ultimately end up being taxed more and more as they work more and more. This is the concept of modern slavery in which we are living now. As I explained, middle class and lower income groups was made to believe by the governments by learning a skill, a people could earn more money. But ultimately, these people don't earn more money when they work more. These people ultimately end up paying more taxes to the government and making more profit for the rich capitalists. And by this process, rich become more richer and poor becomes more poorer, and the economic inequality rises day by day. And it is believed that nearly 2% of the rich people own the same amount of money as nearly 50% of the poor people. This is a huge economic inequality in this era. The money was a tool which was used by the rich to exploit the poor by means of slavery and taxation. By this knowledge, let's see how the money was evolved, how we are using the money today. As I said, in an example of farmer and a carpenter, these two people were able to exchange their capital. For farmer, it was his food he produced, and for the carpenter, it was a furniture which he produced. These both people exchanged these, and in the means of exchange, the barter system evolved. As the time goes by, many things came into exchange, or many things came into market. So ultimately, a chaos ended up between what is the value of what. And ultimately, an emperor was told for government was needed to step in and produce a stable system, which is metal coins or currency. But this metal coins had some value, so they can be exchanged for goods and services which the people provided. In 18th century, in the end of 18th century and in the 19th century, the people suddenly shifted from metal coins to paper currency, and the paper currency was pegged to metal coins. And by the evolution of computer technology, phones, tablets, and everything, now are in the age of digital currencies, and by digital currency, I mean the figure which appears in your bank account when you open your net banking, or a digital currency is what the figure which is appear on your Paytm screen, phone pay wallet, and many technological apps. By cryptocurrency, it is an project which has been proposed by Satoshi Nakamoto after the global financial crisis of 2008. Satoshi Nakamoto was an anonymous person, and he told that cryptocurrency as a means for the people so that they can exchange their wealth among themselves without the intervention of government or being taxed by the government. Since it is not being taxed, the cryptocurrency is now not legally being accepted by many countries and are banned in many countries. And with this evolution of money, we will see how the dollar, which is a currency of United States, became the king of currency. Let's see how it became into existence. Money was always exchanged in the physical form. Money was always exchanged in the physical form. After the introduction of paper currencies in 18th century, the paper currencies was pegged to gold. After the paper currency was pegged to gold, in 1970, President Nixon, who was the President of United States at that time, announced that a Britain wood system would be replaced de facto by current regimen based on freely floating fiat currency. By this, he means that the paper currency, which is now pegged to gold, would be free to print by the government and can be easily used in the circulation. And this example you can see in the picture as I depicted. First, in early centuries or in the 200 century and 3rd century, the gold became the store value and means of exchange for goods and services. And slowly, after 18th century and 19th century, a dollar or paper currency was introduced. After the Second World War, US, which was ultimate winner of the Second World War, met with other foreign nations and told that the dollar would be a currency which will be released into circulation, and the dollar would be pegged to gold. With this in mind, the dollar was pegged to gold and released into circulation. By 1970, the dollar was released from gold, and dollar became the means of transaction throughout the world without any superior authority for its control. And now, today, the US government can spend and print how much ever dollars it can want without the permission of anything, which is now controlled by Federal Bank, a bank which is of United States. And ultimately, every currency in the world, like rupees, euro, is also linked to dollar. The dollar is one which determines the value of the currency. And today's value, according to today's value, $1 is equal to 78 rupees plus or minus, and thus becomes a dollar, making it a king of currency in today's world. Next, we will go to see about capitalism in 21st century. Money is usually controlled and printed by central bank nowadays, and central bank over to the central government in exchange for bonds. What are bonds? You might be wondering. A bond is a piece of paper which promised by the government to the central bank so that it would repay the amount to the central bank after some time with a certain amount of interest. With this bond in mind, the capitalism is mainly driven by a debt or loan, in which a money raised out of thin air just by printing of notes by the central bank and selling them for interest to the governments in exchange of bonds, as I have explained. The government utilizes it for various welfare schemes so that it could raise the economy out of the country. So, as I explained it, first the Reserve Bank would print the money, and the money which is owed to the central government for interest, and the government utilizes the funds for various welfare schemes. And since the welfare schemes works out, like building bridges, building dams, building many infrastructure, and spending on healthcare like COVID crisis, and ultimately lifts the economy. And after some time, it taxes the citizen, and with the tax revenue, it repays the loan which has brought from Reserve Bank of India. This is how a capitalism of today's world works in each and every country in the world. If we see in this picture, today's world by 2010 data, the GDP of world is nearly about 64 trillion. But in this actual wealth which is produced is just 20 trillion. That means there is a difference of $45 trillion now circulating in the world just because we printed the money more and more. And there is no wealth to back the paper currency, and hence it leads to increase in inflation day by day. By 1997, our total global debt was only $50 trillion, and by 2017 it has been raised more than 350 percentage, which took it to $233 trillion, which is more than what we can imagine. Of this, United States leads this list with total global debt of 105 trillion, and second comes China with 63 trillion, and third with Japan. And India, by the end of 2019, had a total global debt of $12 trillion, which is 3.5 percentage of the total global debt. And as the COVID crisis struck, everybody is getting defaulted, so that the lender will ultimately get default, and which leads to decrease or contraction of global GDP to the normal level according to how much wealth we have produced. With this capitalism, we are in the era of 21st century, in which many technological companies for past 20 years has mastered the art of behavioral economics. I mean, by telling behavioral economics, it is an economics which is based out of behavior of its customer. For example, I would say a sin companies like ITC, which is an Indian tobacco company which makes cigarettes. It is based on a production of cigarettes, so that each and every consumer which it uses comes back to back again, because no smoker can quit smoking unless he undergoes some medical intervention. And thus, Richard Taylor, who's a Nobel economist, has stated that by studying the habits of your customers, you can easily alter the behavior of the customer. I would think this slide would be more useful for today's generation. Let's look into the Instagram business model, which has been designed around the behavioral economics. For this, we need to look about 4 points in this, which is trigger, action, rewards, and investment. By trigger, and this has been mentioned in the book named Hooked by Eric Noel as an itch cycle, basically an itch which occurs to the human. I would be explaining it in the Instagram hook model. By trigger, I would like to mean, and when we keep our phone aside, an Instagram notification arises, which triggers your brain. So you would pick up the phone to check the Instagram notification, which is an action you do. And with that action, you think you would get some reward. Like how you will get the reward? By keep on scrolling for hours together to get satisfied, so that your photo has been liked how much times, how much friends you have got, and how you kill your boredom. All this time you invest. After getting the reward, you invest your time generating a data for Instagram. For By generating data for Instagram, the Instagram takes it as revenue and sells your data to other companies. By generating data, I mean, for example, if you like a good fashion design apparel page in Instagram, eventually the Instagram would eventually process the data that Dr. Vishnukumar has liked the fashion design apparel, and this data is quickly processed to other websites like Amazon, Flipkart, Google. And eventually, when you open a Google website, you will be clicking or seeing the same fashion design apparel you click in the Instagram or liked in the Instagram. That's how now Amazon, Google, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, every social media and every technological company is using your time to make you spend your money for their profits. Like with this in mind, we are now going to capitalism without capital, our topic of today. These companies make more revenues with minimum investments in tangibles and by studying the consumer habits, that is you. The intangibles are more useful tools in increasing the productivity and revenues of the company. By this time, you would be wondering what are the tangibles and intangibles, right? By this, the tangibles and intangibles, I mean, the tangibles is the one you can touch, feel, throw, or see. But the intangible assets are the ones you cannot feel. Have they existed or not? For tangible assets, I would like to tell it as cash, furniture, plant, machineries, vehicles, buildings, stock, equipments, and computers, which are tangible assets which you can sell easily, touch, feel, and do whatever with it. But intangible assets are not like that. Those are patents, logo, a brand value. A brand value is more valuable for McDonald's, but the same brand value doesn't seem a good use for some lower company which makes a fast food by your street corner, because he doesn't know what are intangible assets. Today, the world economy is more driving towards the future as intangible assets are increasing day by day. As we can see, in 1975, there were only 70% of the companies had intangible assets. By 30 years, after the 30 years, nearly 84% of the companies are now using intangible assets as their main source of revenue or income. With this intangible assets in mind, I would tell you what are the companies are using with these intangibles or having no tangibles assets. For example, Uber is the world's largest taxi company which doesn't own a single vehicle. By the way, Airbnb is the largest accommodation provider which doesn't own a single real estate or a property. Likewise, the Facebook, Instagram, Netflix, and Alibaba doesn't have any tangible assets. They act as a middleman between the producer and the consumer and gives you what the consumer likes and absorbs the middleman's revenue and making huge fortune for themselves. Like I said, these companies act as an orchestrated network in the internet, which act as an intermediate between the producer and consumer and absorb the cost of middlemen or dealers, making huge revenues for themselves. With investment in software, servers to store data, these companies make huge fortune, as I said. With this intangibles in rising, there's a huge technological revolution happening. You can see these are the 10 valuable and most loved brands in the technological revolution. These companies helps in digitizing the world. These companies would be so helpful in for the last 2 months, the whole world, which was undergoing a self-quarantine or curfew by the state or central governments. It improves your connectivity. It helps in providing you the vast amount of information. It helps in providing you more and more entertainment as you need within a finger of seconds. And these are service industries which provide you more and more. By service industries, I mean industries such as entertainment industry, legal industry, healthcare industry, all these service industry. And let's look how these intangibles make a huge part in manufacturing sector. These technological intangibles are not only limited to the service sector, but also extend its uses to manufacturing sector. For example, on automation process, in automation process, it automates everything so that the company doesn't need a human capital. So it can cut the human capital by saving the profit for itself and making automation process still more efficient and investing more in intangibles. And like this, Internet of Things, mobile devices, Internet of Things of platform, location detection technology, advanced human-machine interfaces, authentication and fraud detection systems, 3D printing, and at last, a big analytics and advanced process are also in line for manufacturing sector to be more and more efficient. But these all technology in place, now the manufacturing sector is moving into Industrial Revolution 4.0, which primarily focus use of large-scale machine-to-machine communication, Internet of Things, to provide increased automation, improved communication, self-monitoring, as well as smart machines which analyzes, diagnose without human intervention. With this in process, more humans are unemployed because of automation, and it is estimated that by 2025 more will be unemployed because of this automation and robotics. As we can see, the first industrial revolution was mechanization, water power and steam power, and the fourth was cyber and physical systems which doesn't need a human capital. And industrial 4.0, the technological pillars are cloud computing, mobile technology, 3D printing, advanced robotics, big data, and many more. With this rise of intangibles, it would be so difficult for a company when it goes bankrupt and for judiciary to make it insolvent or to reorganize it. For example, by bankruptcy, I mean when a company goes bankrupt, it is either reorganized, which is recently reorganized, such as S Bank, which got reorganized in the past 2 months when it got bankrupt, and or insolvency. And by insolvency, I mean that court orders the company to sell its assets to whomever it can sell and make the money out of it and pay back the borrowers. And such a case was done with our Jet Airways, in which its many flights has been sold to Indigo and cash out of it to pay to its creditors or borrowers. In recent years, the insolvency profession began to understand various ways to value intangible assets, but it has more complex and privacy issues concerned with it. Let's see how insolvency has made a Kodak company drop from valuation of $4.5 billion to just $94 million. Before Kodak filed for bankruptcy, its portfolio had 1,700 patents and 655 applications, which valued it at 4.5 billion. But after it filed bankruptcy, it was just 2.6 billion, and after it was sold for just 94 million, which is recent, which is just 600 crores. But before it filed for bankruptcy, it was valued at 40,000 crores. And astonishingly, year before the Kotak filed for bankruptcy, the Samsung acquired only one patent for just woofing amount of 433 million, which is nearly 2,500 crores. Next major challenge for judiciary would be the sale of intangibles and data privacy. For example, if you can imagine a hypothetical situation where a Google company becomes bankrupt after a decade or so, your whole data which lies in that company, which now organizes and services each and every human in the world, has huge amount of data which is private data. And if this data is going to be sold in the process of bankruptcy, how dangerous it would be, or how would be when the data privacy has been leaked out. With almost every technological company betting on users' data, it poses severe threat to privacy of data to its consumer. Thus, the sale of intangible presents more challenging conditions legally to value the consumer data as an asset and sell it to the creditor. And we need more laws and more legal system in India, as today Reliance and Facebook deal has been confirmed, so that our every data would be watched by Facebook, and every data would be, which is created by Geo, would be taken by Facebook for its own value creation and asset creation. This poses a huge threat for the Indian consumer, and I right now ask the legal system to frame new laws about data privacy and save the data privacy and save the consumer data of its fellow citizen. Thank you.